Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me for a webinar where we will be covering the HUD COC Annual Performance Report, or the APR, as it comes out of the HMIS. And this is specifically your 625 and your 631 HUD COC APR reports that are available in ART. So I'm Amanda Fox, and I'm here with you today from All Chicago, and I appreciate you joining me. So we're going to jump in here and look at our agenda first. And here we go. So our agenda, we're going to first talk about what the APR is. I know some of you are going to be brand new to this process. Others are going to be sort of veterans to this and have done this often, but we've all been a little out of practice with APRs because we haven't been able to submit them for several months. So we're also perhaps getting back to this from having not done this for a while. So I myself am in that position too. So we're going to all kind of refamiliarize ourselves together and introduce this to those that have never used this tool before. But we'll first talk about that, and then we're going to cover the difference between the two reports we have available in our Advanced Reporting Tool, or ART, and those are the 0625 and the 0631 reports. Those are often the way we talk about the APR coming out of HMIS is by the number of the HMIS report we use to analyze the results. We're also going to look at how we run these reports in ART, and we'll actually go to the system to walk through the steps of running the report once we get to that point. And we'll also talk at length about how we interpret the 625 and then how we interpret the 631 separately. And when we're doing that, we'll also look at how we work with the reports while they're in ART or in the database, and also how we work with them once we download them, because we can also put these into Excel or PDF files and work with them that way. And then we want to make sure we cover any questions. So throughout the webinar, feel free to type in your questions to make sure that if there's a topic you want to make sure I cover, that I hit that topic, or if there's something specific about the area I'm focusing on, that you get a question answered, and I'll be paying attention to that. So let's start by talking about what the APR is. And this is a language that comes from a source on the HUD Exchange, which is called the eSNAPS COC APR Guidebook for COC grant-funded programs. So in and of itself, you're seeing here that this is a tool that is primarily intended for HUD and COC grant-funded programs. And I do have a link here that takes you directly to that resource, which I can send out these PowerPoint slides after the webinar. But this is what comes from that guidebook in terms of the language around what an annual performance report is and how it's used by HUD to evaluate all of our COC-funded projects on their performance. And you can see here that the expectation is that the results from HMIS are taken, downloaded from our system based on the data that you've entered, and then you will use that to type the information into another system called eSNAPS. We do not support eSNAPS on the HMIS team. We support the data until it gets to the point where you have to download it from HMIS. After that, it's sort of a different system that you would be putting it into, and eSNAPS is not one that our team supports. We don't have access to eSNAPS for your program's data. So there's a distinction there in terms of what level of support we can offer. But there is also this timeline here for you that there is a 90-day window typically after your operating year ends where your APR would be submitted to HUD through eSNAPS. So again, let me know if this raises questions, but that is what the APR is. I should also mention, though, that the tool of these 625 and these 631 reports, as we'll look at them, you should also notice that there's a lot of information in there that you might choose to use for other purposes beyond this intention. This is why we have these reports, but within them, you'll find data that you might choose to use for purposes beyond your annual reporting to HUD. So just keep in mind that you don't have to only run this for that purpose, but you can run them for other reasons. And I think you'll see quickly what those reasons might be that you would find that advantageous. So let's look now at the difference between the 625 and the 631. And this is just some basic differences. The 625 is actually the report that informs the data that you would enter into eSnaps, and that represents your outcomes and your measures of the characteristics of the clients you've served, and it's all totals. There's no client level information, and there's no details. So you'll see very quickly the difference between these reports when we look at them. But it also, just reiterate there, the 625 is the one that actually gives you the information that you use to submit into eSnaps. So how you figure out what the 625 is actually calculating is included within your 631 HUD COC APR detail report. So these reports are very much complementary, or they work closely together, because without the 631, the 625 is fairly mysterious. You don't understand immediately from that report who in your program is contributing to the totals, and that's why we have the 631, so you can actually answer the questions around who are the clients that are showing up in this particular category. So you will very much see that detailed within the 0631 report. So it breaks down those aggregate numbers. It also gives you an opportunity to identify the errors in your client's data so that you can improve your results in your 625 report before you would end up submitting your results through eSnaps to HUD. Also within the 631, something that's very helpful is you'll find a way to identify the clients that you have missed entering an annual assessment for, in particular for those programs that are considered permanent supportive housing and transitional housing. Those ones that are serving clients for 365 days and longer are expected to do an annual assessment every year. And there is actually an expectation that that annual assessment is done within a 60-day window of 30 days before or 30 days after the anniversary date of the client entering your program. So these are very good reasons to also start this work early when you are preparing for an APR, because based on what you see in your 631, there's going to be a couple of things that might need to happen. One of them is that you'll need to work with your own users to correct data if you find that there's things that you can change to improve your results before you submit. And secondly, there may be things that you need to reach out to the HMIS help desk to help improve in your results, and that will be cases where you just don't understand why there's something happening in the report, or why there's an error that you can't see in the system, in the client's record. Those are the types of things that you would end up, and a lot of you already do, reach out to the HMIS help desk for our support. So I don't see any questions yet, but let me know as you have them. We're going to look next. We're actually going to go to HMIS here in just a second and start looking at how we run these reports and understanding how to work with them. So on that note, here is the path to find the APR reports in our system. So this is, once you've already gone into ART, you can follow the public folder path down to the secure folder into our actual APR folder, and you'll start to see the reports themselves. And this is the last slide that I really had here for us, and now we're going to jump over to the system and actually look at how we work with these. So let me pull over the database here. And there we go. So once you've logged into the system, you will end up going straight to ART here. I'm going to connect to ART, and I'm going to come over to this public folder. I'm going to go to my secure folder, my APR folder, and I'm going to start with the 625, and then we'll go into the 631. So starting from the 625, click on my magnifying glass, go in under View Report, and notice that a second tab has just opened in my browser. So I can still go back to client point or service point if I choose to here. So this is still open, just so you know, but watch that my little my icon up here is spinning, telling me that it's processing. So that's just something to be aware of, that you can move around in the system or in general on your computer while you're waiting for the APR report to process. The majority of you are ATAs that are on this webinar, but I don't know if you have specific questions about how this works, but do let me know if you're an active ATA already, if you have questions about some of this. And in general, I'm covering some of these more basic details because there are some folks on the webinar that are also not familiar with art in general yet, new ATAs, or perhaps there's some people on here that are not ATAs at all. But here comes the report, and you can start to see the prompt will come here next because we'll have to fill out prompts before we're able to calculate see the results calculate in the report. You can also start to see the different tabs that we'll have available within the results of this report. So right now we're in tab A, and then you'll see all the other tabs. We'll be able to click within them to see the results. So here's our prompt window for the APR, and it starts off on the select provider groups. The ones that we need to focus on are select provider, the second number one here. We want to make sure our start date reflects the date that your program's reporting year began. The end date will be the end date of your reporting year +1. The type of entry needs to be correct based on the type of entry your program uses. If you're a HUD-funded program, most likely you use HUD, but I'll click in here so you can see that you can change this. And those are really the things that we want to make sure are completely accurate before you run this report. The other thing that we've done is set up an effective date that's far in the future so that you don't have to worry about setting this field. As long as that's either today, the day you're running the report, or a day in the future, the effective date is just fine. So starting with the first prompt here, how this works, I'm going to click on that select provider or providers. Where it says none selected right now, I need to get a program name listed there. So in order to get a program name listed there, I need to use this box here. And if right now I don't have any options to choose from in this box, but note this, this little message here: to see the content of the list, please click the Refresh Values button. Here we go, click Refresh Values. And now we have all of our programs listed that are in our system. There's two options to select your program, because notice there's still nothing selected here. I can either scroll through this list and look for my program alphabetically, or I can use this little bar down at the bottom and I can do a search. So those of you that are active ATAs, you may or may not know that you can do this, but be aware. I can put in either a word, or I could have also put in a number. So notice that typing in All Chicago limited the available options to just those with All Chicago in the name. If I memorized the provider number of my project, I can also do a search on the number, and it will limit the results further. So no matter how you get to the right provider in this list, whether you scroll, you search for the name, or you search for the exact project number, you want to highlight this, the project you want to run this report on, and you're going to use this button here to move it over under selected providers. Once I've done that, you should notice that that provider is listed up at the top as well. It is possible to run this report on multiple providers, and if you choose to do that, you would pull in the other providers as well. And I'll just give you an example of how that works. If I also wanted to pull in this PSH project, I would just move that over, get rid of this none selected by moving that back, and now my report would run on both of these projects together. If I want to get rid of one of these, again, I just move that back. I'm going to focus on this particular project's data because I know this is all fake data, but let's also look at how you change your start dates. So if I needed to adjust this start date, I would just type over this. So if I'm just going to type it in 10/1/2015, that would be fine. You don't have to put in that time that was there. This little icon here would allow me to use these options in order to move around to the correct date. If I prefer to use that method, that would be fine as well. And then you can also set it to today if you were going to run a report using today's date for some reason as well. Same thing happens with the end date. It works exactly the same way that you have your calendar icon as well. The entry type, this is where you want to make sure that if you are using HUD, that is the option listed here. Notice that you do have all the available options if you need to change this. Perhaps yours is a program, if you want to run this on your RI projects, that's fine, or your VA projects, you could do that if you choose to. VA projects, we've actually been discouraged from running the APR using that type of program. Specifically SSVF projects, but just so you know that that's possible. And that's really the only ones I'm going to show you because those are the ones you want to focus on to make sure that they are set correctly. And now we just run query. So it will take typically a matter of seconds, or it can take a little bit longer depending on the amount of data that the program is calculating to run this report. So this is where a lot of us already know that working with art can sometimes be a waiting game, that you're trying to let the system process without getting logged out. So if you are going to choose to go back to Service Point and work on anything in the system here, like in Client Point or anything, just make sure you're watching your cursor or your icon spin up here to make sure that you get your results when they're ready, as opposed to ending up coming back here to being logged out of the system. Because I will tell you from experience that that happens to me more often than I'd like to admit. But by the way, this last time refresh where it says 9 seconds, that's just indicating how long it took to run the last time this report was run, but it's clearly taking a little bit longer than 9 seconds this time. So I will just mention that I haven't seen any questions come in yet, and perhaps we'll get to the questions when we get more to the meat of it, if you will. And I think the 631 is most certainly the more complicated of the two reports, because in that report you're actually looking at a significant amount of data to look at and parse through what's contributing to the totals that this report will reflect. And this is actually taking a little bit longer than I might have hoped. I do have an example of an APR, so I'll pull this up just to look at this for a second to show you how this works so that we don't miss an opportunity here to spend some time on the data. Looks like we do have a question, so I'm going to pop this out to look at that real quick. Felicia, you had asked would the date that's entered for the start date be the first date and last date of the ending grant period. So I think you are correct that it would be the first date of your reporting period and then the last date plus 1 day. So if your contract ran from October 2015 to September 30th, 2016, you would use the start date of 10/1/15 through the end date of 10/1/16 because the way we run the reports, it's end date of the reporting period plus 1 day, so to make sure you include any data from the last day of the reporting period that was entered. And let's just do a check-in here to see if in that time it looks like it has processed. So we're going back to the database. We're looking at this directly in ART right now because we're ready to go with some results here. So notice immediately that you have counts available under 7 at the top here. So it's talking about the HMIS or comparable database data quality first to tell you the total number of records for all clients and then just adults that were in this program's data. Here's a good little check for unaccompanied youth. If your program's not supposed to have any children enrolled by themselves, that should be 0. And then you see how many people left the program as well. So there's this concept of stayers and leavers in our APRs. Leavers are clients that left the program during the reporting period. Stayers are clients that did not leave the program before the last day of the reporting period and stayed enrolled, basically. So what you see under the data elements section, we're looking at all the data elements that are being calculated for don't know or refused answers and missing data. So these are things that often I find that users want to get rid of all of the missing data before they would be submitting the report. But as we go into the next tabs, you'll see that we don't have that level of detail in this particular report because we're looking at the 625 right now. So this information, the clients that are contributing to that missing data would actually be identified through the 631 report. But this gives you a sense of what your what you would actually have to put into eSNAPs to show how much data was missing. So let's move into tab B. Here's where you actually start to see the groupings of clients, how many clients were served during the operating year that are in the category of adults or children, or ones that the system wasn't able to identify, doesn't know, refused, and then missing information. Who are we missing information for where we can't calculate whether they're an adult or a child? I should also mention that you may not choose to look at this report while you're in the system. You might prefer to download this to review the results. So right now, just be aware that we are in ART. We're still in the advanced reporting tool. But if we want to actually download this, you would come over here to Document. You would use this little arrow down, and you would do Save to My Computer As, and then choose most likely a PDF in this case in order to get this out of the system. So if you were to do Save Report to My Computer As and do it as a PDF, you would only get the tab that we're in right now. So you wouldn't actually download every tab of this report, all of these additional tabs. You would only download tab B. So there's a significant difference between Save Report to My Computer As and Save to My Computer As. Save to My Computer As will give you everything that you see, all of the tabs, and I would do a PDF if you were going to download this when you download the 625, because you don't necessarily need this in an Excel file. But if you are going to do Save Report to My Computer As, just be aware that you're only going to get the one tab of the report that you're, the one report that you're actually looking at right now. I'll stay in ART for the moment to look at these, but let me know if that raised any questions. So that's sort of the first category here. It's showing you also by types of households, whether it's households without children or with children and adults, with children only, or unknown household types. So this can also be a good data quality check here, even at this level. So starting with your 625 can give you a sense if you know the numbers of your programs, or if you work with someone that can analyze this quickly to see where there might be concerns, because perhaps your program serves households with children, and if you have households without children, those might be ones that you need to investigate further to figure out if there's issues where a child wasn't entered into a program or something like that, and vice versa. If you serve a program that does not have children, if you have categories appearing here where you are serving households with children, you would also want to investigate that to ensure the data is accurate before you would use it for submissions to HUD. So you get some averages here, average numbers of persons served each night. And then also you're looking at point-in-time counts on the last Wednesdays in January, April, July, and October. Those are actually the same dates that we look at as a system for our annual homeless assessment report. So these are consistent dates that we use to analyze how many clients are in our programs, basically, to get a sense of our points, our counts. It's 4 points in the year. And so these are very consistent dates that you'll see us use in various places to capture this. So we are doing it the same way everywhere that we do this analysis. And as we come down, you'll also see the number in total of the households that were served, and then households, point in time counts of households too. So the data is spliced in a lot of different ways in the APRs. So sometimes it's helpful just to focus on the things that are the most relevant for your program. This is a tab C, where you most likely won't see data appear. This is really for our street outreach programs in particular. So let me know if anyone has questions about this particular tab, but I won't really go into much detail about this because I anticipate for a lot of programs that they're not capturing contacts and engagements. But for tab D, This is where you'll see counts of the gender of your adults separated, and then gender of children, and then gender for those that are missing their age, so it's unable to determine. And it is breaking it down by, again, the households with children, adults, and unknown. So let me know if this raises any questions, but this is one of the aspects of your APR that goes into eSNAPs. Yeah, just thinking about the questions that we get consistently. Here we go. So one of the questions that you will most likely need to investigate is information missing in all of these reports. That's one that jumps out to a lot of managers, directors, people responsible for this data submission. Definitely getting at who are the clients represented by that 2 for missing data under that category is going to be something that someone's going to most likely want to find out. So we'll look at how you determine that as well. This is just telling you that there is missing information that you'll need to go investigate using your 631. So here we are in tab E, also looking at ages of those categories of household types. And again, you have your missing information, and this time you also have an age error message showing you whether you have folks that are have a negative age or those that have ages that are over 100, so an indication that there's most likely an error. You also have your ethnicity broken down here, and race categories, multiple races. It is calculating that based on whether you've indicated a secondary race. If you have, the person is showing up as multiracial. And I'm going to move into tab F. Here we're looking at our disabling conditions or disabilities. And you're looking at physical and mental health types of conditions at entry, just total numbers here for households, numbers of persons in households. So it is important to know or to read exactly the description here to know what you're looking at in terms of the people that are represented. And this is just numbers of people as opposed to the calculation above. And as you scroll down, you get into your domestic violence, and also when the domestic violence last occurred is listed here. And I'm going to come over here to tab G to look at this. And here's actually our residents prior to entry into the program, and we have it broken out by the homeless situations, the institutional settings, and then all other locations as well here, for you to be able to see, like, is there any concerns with where the clients are listed as having come from before entering your program? Are you allowed to serve clients that came from permanent housing programs before entering your program? Would that raise any red flags in your APR? That's what this tab might be indicating for those that are reviewing these results. And if you're in a role where you're going to be asked to investigate these things, I would definitely be prepared for those questions if I was being asked to run this report and submitting it to someone else at my agency, because most likely someone will come back and want to know who are these 3 clients that were staying or living with family, so that they can validate that that's accurate and perhaps determine if there was a data entry error, if that's not something that your program typically is allowed to do in terms of eligibility. You also have the missing information here to indicate where you have some information that could be cleaned up if you choose to. And we're going to look at tab H. So here you are with your veteran status broken down, and now we're getting into leavers. Notice now we're talking about the folks that have left your program and their physical and mental health conditions. And let's actually just go back quickly to tab G. This was just their residences prior to entry, but tab H is where we actually get in first time into the leavers. And it might have been back a tab actually, because I thought we looked at the mental health issues already, and so forth. So just note when you're looking at stayers versus leavers data, and here we are looking at leavers data. So anyone that exited your programs are separated out here. Tab I. So, and note the questions here that you would see in eSNAPs, questions 23 and 24 here. This is an interesting tab. This is looking at all of your income detail at an aggregate level. And so with this, you're looking at those clients that had no income for entry, And this income at latest follow-up for stayers, this latest follow-up means interim reviews, annual assessments, updates that were entered using interim reviews in the client's records. That's what's indicated in these income at latest follow-up for stayers. And then you have your income at exit for leavers. And then for 24A, it also has a B1 and a B2 and a B3 down here. So this one's broken down a lot of different ways. And this tab is definitely one that can inform things that need to be reviewed more closely within the 631 detail report, because here you're looking at adults with only earned income, with the only other income, as well as both types of income. And then here you've got adults with no income. So if you've got adults at exit with no income and you want to verify who that is to confirm these results, this will tell you how many clients you're looking for that would fit into that category, as well as adults with the don't know refused. Is that accurate? Or perhaps you would use this as an indication to go back and confirm that you did not have that information before you would use this data for submission. And as well, the missing information would be something else that I can imagine a lot of programs needing to validate before ensuring that these results are accurate, because it certainly doesn't go over well for a lot of programs if they have the opportunity to enter information correctly and end up just because of data entry issues not doing it, and then it has impact on your program when it comes to your reporting to HUD. We don't want your outcomes to be negatively impacted by data quality issues. So this is again another point where if you see issues like this where you have significant numbers of clients in these categories, and more so with the missing data, this would be stuff you'd want to look at early in that 90 days after your contract year ends to make sure that we have time to even assist you if it's not clear for you right away on how to fix this. We want to make sure we have a number of days in advance of you submitting in order to work through any challenges. And I would even push that to say a number of weeks. Sometimes the preparation for an APR can take weeks, depending on how much time you on your end can spend on this, and then on our end how quickly we can respond to the issues as we work through them together. So it's a process, and we encourage you to start it early. So as you come down to 24B1, this is where you talk about income change. And here's where you're looking at headers about the client had income at entry and not at follow-up, so meaning not at their interim review. And then clients that retained income but had less money at their interim review, so clients that had a decrease in income would be listed here. And then clients that retained their income and had the same amount at follow-up, so nothing had changed, and verifying on your end if you need to that that's true. And then those that had an increase and the amount, so yeah, increased dollar amount at follow-up from the time of entry, and then did not have income at entry and gained it at follow-up. So now you're looking at clients that have increased from a point of no income, and then just the clients that did not have income at entry or at follow-up, and then total adults, including those with no income. So here's where you're starting to see these boxes outlined in the teal color, the yellow color, and then this purple color. Notice that adding together these two numbers totals this number, and that's the way this is supposed to work. We're supposed to have this the blue and the yellow equal the purple. So that should be something that is already working when you run the report, but if you ever find that those numbers don't match, that's definitely a reason to start investigating. And some of what you're trying to do in the preparation for the APR is make sure that everything goes into eSnaps without errors. So in my historical use of these reports, being an ATA, it was my job to help managers and directors work through submitting the eSnaps the report through eSnaps. I didn't personally submit the reports, but I was the person that the person doing that would reach out to and say, I got an error in my eSnaps data entry. We need to figure out what's going on in the report. So sometimes this is working together with someone else. Sometimes you're doing both sides of it. But either way, this is definitely something that is important to make sure is all set up properly so that you're not caught off guard when you're going to submit in eSnaps and finding that there's errors then. This is where you can catch them first. So you do also have the various categories here indicating adults that had earned income versus the average change in earned income, adults with other income, and so on and so forth. So there is, again, just a lot of different ways that the data is broken down. So then you're looking at income change, and you can see up here also that this is looking at adult stayers with income info at entry and follow-up. This one, 24B2, is looking at adult leavers with income info at entry and exit. So just recognize sort of what information is being calculated. And also for 24B3, income change by income category, meaning total adults with income info at entry and either follow-up stayers or leavers. So let's look at tab J, but let me know if there's questions. Okay, so here's where we get into the breakdown of what are the types of income for leavers, the sources of income, and also the number of sources listed here. And here's where you have that missing information jumping out at you, that there's a client that perhaps you have this information for, where you could enter it and not have someone listed as missing. Let's go to tab K. So here's where we're looking at our non-cash benefits. Notice our health insurance is showing up in here as well. And also you have your adults and your children, of course, and anyone that doesn't have a date of birth is listed here as age unknown. And then again, the sources, how many of these sources, how many are missing this information. And tab L, our length of participation by exit status, how long are your clients staying in your programs. This is also one that I recall having to go back and forth quite a bit about to figure out, are we serving clients for longer than we're allowed to? Are they falling into these categories that are beyond the scope of the length of time we're supposed to serve our clients? So this is another good one to check to make sure that you're accurately representing how long clients were really enrolled in your program through your entry and exit, and then your averages and your medians. So perhaps this is starting to give you a sense of other uses for these reports in the event that you'd like to take advantage of these for other types of data analysis and reporting, because the 625 and 631 can help you with a lot of things. So tab M, here's where you're looking at destinations by household type and length of stay. All leavers who stayed more than 90 days is how this one is broken down. Here's where you get to see how many people you exited to permanent destinations and the destinations that are considered permanent, as well as how many clients you exited to temporary destinations and those that were exited to institutional settings and other destinations, including those that had passed away, those that you don't know where they went, or the client doesn't know, or the client refused to tell you where they went, and those that you either did not answer the question for, or that you chose no exit interview completed. Those will also show up here as missing, information missing. And I'm going to go to tab N. So here's where we're getting to our outcomes. We're looking at our program types. So you will only see data appear in the A, B, or C, depending on the type of program you operate. And this is based on how we have you classified in the database. Do we have you set up as permanent housing, rapid rehousing? If so, you'll have data populate in 36A. If we have you set up as transitional, you'll have data populate here and not in A, and the same for street outreach, that this is where your data will populate for outcomes. And these are calculated very particularly, so if you end up having questions about how they're calculated, we can work through that with you. But if you have issues with which one of these boxes is populating, that's also something we need to work with you on, because that means that we have to talk about what type of program you're set up as. The last tab here, tab O, this will actually show you the prompts, that how you completed the prompts before you ran this report. So notice we don't run these reports typically on groups, so this would always say none selected, unless there's some reason we have you set up to run these on groups, which I can't really speak to that for anyone on this webinar. Select providers, that will be the program it's run on, your start and end dates. Mind you, this is plus 1 day, but this would be your contract start date and end date. The type of entries you use, and then here, this note. This is here because of the way that our software vendor has these reports set up. So they have these reports set up to flag effective dates that are after the end date of the report. So it's telling us that HUD says, in no case will data collected after the last day of the reporting period be included on the APR. So that is a message that we tend to ignore. And I say that we ignore that because we follow a workflow in Chicago that is slightly different than what this is suggesting. This is suggesting that we are actually using the end date of the reporting period as our effective date. We are encouraging you to make your effective date either the day you run the report, literally the actual date that you run it, no matter what the start and end date of the report are, or right now we have the end date set up to, or the effective date, excuse me, set up to be 1/1/18 by default for you. And you can leave that as it is. The alternative, if you want to adjust the effective date, would be to change it to the day you are actually running the report. That is the most important thing to remember. This error message here is not going to impact your results and their ability to be submitted through eSnaps. And that's all I'll say about that, but let me know if that raises questions or concerns. Again, you will see the number of clients listed here and an unduplicated client count, so that's just something to be aware of. There could be duplicate clients that you would want to address as well. So that's the 625. I'm going to show you also, if you are an ATA that is responsible for multiple APRs, you may want to know about, in general in art, if you don't know this already, you may want to know about this refresh all option. Because if I would like to run this report again right now on a different program or on a different time frame, maybe I realized I ran it on the wrong start and end dates, I don't have to close this tab altogether and go back to the system. I could go here to refresh all. Once I do that, it's refreshing data and pulling up my prompt box again. So I could come back to my provider. I could change this if I needed to. If I ran this, if I didn't change the start and end date by accident and I intended to, I could go back and change this. Maybe it was 9/1/2015 that I was supposed to look at. That's just something that you should be aware of, that you can do this without leaving this window. This does imply that you're rerunning the report on the exact same report. You can't refresh all to try to run a different type of art report, just so that's clear. The other thing you should be aware of is that you would come here, just to get another reminder, you come to Document, and you would come to Save to My Computer As to get all of these tabs, and I would recommend as a PDF. Once you do this, the system is processing here, and it's saying at the bottom here that it was waiting for service point, and then it will open up a file that I'll be able to grab from the bottom of my, my window here. It depends on what web browser you're using in terms of how these reports are downloaded. And there's a question here, Unita, you're asking where is the refresh all button? Refresh all is right up here in the upper right corner. And I'll zoom in here so you can see that. So see refresh all right there? That is allowing me to pull up this prompt box again in order to change something about whether it's the program or the start and end date. And you are welcome. That changed my world when I found out there was a refresh all button, and I hope it provides some relief to you as well of time spent moving back and forth. So it doesn't look like the file populated down here for me, but just to show you an example, this is what the 625 will look like when you do pull it out of the system. This is in a PDF file, so I would still be able to use my navigation buttons on the left side of the screen in order to navigate between those tabs. Otherwise, I can just keep scrolling in order to see all those different questions that we saw when we were in ART. So this is a separate PDF file right now, so I'm going to close this. This is the ART window, and I'm actually going to close this as well, because now we're going to move over to the 631 to look at that. Notice that I didn't really emphasize many of these other buttons for this particular report because I personally don't know that they're useful in this this ART report. So I'm going to close this one and say leave, and now I want to go to the I thought I might be logged out. So there's a distinction between your login in ServicePoint and your login in ART. Oftentimes, if you're working in ART, you can find that you can get logged out of ServicePoint. And if you are logged into ART and you start working in ServicePoint, you can find that you get logged out of ART. So be aware that these are separate. And they are separate because ART is actually, so our advanced reporting tool is actually not part of ServicePoint. It is something that we're connecting to, right? As we come up here to this button to connect to ART, it's taking us to another server that would be actually where our data every night from ART, and I'll show you this when I go over here. Notice that it says here last warehouse build November 18th. Let me scroll down and see that again. Last warehouse build November 18th, 2016, 1:37 37 a.m. So at 1:37 and 37 seconds in the morning last night, there was a warehouse build where all of our data from ServicePoint was pulled over to the advanced reporting tool in order for us to run these more complex reports. So that is something that is extremely important when you are preparing for APRs, and you all, a lot of you already know this for the data quality assessment process as well, that you cannot fix something in the system today and expect it to show up in ART today in your reports. There is a delay that you have to wait until this warehouse build happens before you can pull your data from ART that has gone in through ServicePoint. So let me know if that raises questions, but that is an extremely important detail to keep in mind. This is also part of why we have to do our end dates plus 1 day, if that connection is helpful there. So back to the to ART. Sorry to laugh. He's got a sad face from Unita. It is something to be aware of. This is not real time with ART, and that is a lesson that some of us have learned the hard way. But I don't want any of you to have to learn that lesson the hard way. So don't make your corrections the day that you're going to submit things to eSnaps. Make them at least the day before to ensure that they show up in your APR calculations. Okay, so back to the 631. We're going to go down here in the public folder again. We're going to come down into the secure folder, into our APR folder, and now we're going to go into the 631 APR detail. Here's our view report. And again, we're going to wait for a second for all this to process. The 631 is the more complicated of the two reports in terms of analysis on the part of yourself as an ATA or anyone that's going to have this report sent to them. The analysis part is quite specific with this report, but luckily you might find a similar structure to some of the other ART reports that we use, but this one is a little bit I won't say outdated, but the format of it is particular, and then there's been some evolutions in the way that Bowman has built reports since then, because we are not actually the ones building the APR reports. These are built for us by our software vendor, and there's been a shift in the way that they've started building reports, but these ones have remained in the structure that they're in, that they've always been in. So you'll notice some differences like between the way that this report structures the data and the way that our data quality report is set up. But let's look at how this one works. So again, very similar prompts. We're going to want to change the provider. We want to make sure the start date, the end date, the entry type, and scrolling down here, the effective date, making sure that this is at least today, and if you want to change it, the only thing you would change it to is the date that you are actually running the report. That would be the only change you would make if you wanted to make any. It is fine to leave this as it originally was. So if you want to run this on a particular program, which that's the only way it's going to work here, we have to select the provider up at the top. Notice again that if we want to see all the options, we need to use this refresh values button. Once we click on that, we can either scroll through this list and I can find my program here, All Chicago, there's my emergency shelter, and I can pull it over. If I had preferred, I can use the search at the bottom. If I know the number of the project, I can use that and it will reduce the results, or I could have searched on All Chicago too. We encourage you to move this none selected back over to move it out of the selected providers. But once you have your prompt set, you go ahead and run your query. This one as well will take a few minutes to calculate because it is pulling in a lot of data. But does anyone immediately have things that they want to make sure that I touch on with the 631, things that you've struggled with this report? This one is one that we get the most requests for support on, and I would certainly encourage you all to keep us in mind. Reach out to us when you are struggling, if you do struggle, I should say, with interpreting these results, because sometimes it's just a little bit hard to see what's going on because there is a lot of data showing up in this report. So I don't have an example to look at while this processes. So we're going to sit and wait for a second while this calculates. But it would be a good time if you had questions to let me know what they are. You can start to see some of the tabs that we have at the bottom that we'll be able to walk through. And there we go. We got our results. So let's jump in here. Again, you see, this time actually on the summary, you see some of that alert that we saw in the last report about this effective date. Again, we're telling you that the effective date needs, for our community, for Chicago, it needs to be either the day you run the report or you can leave it to the date we have it defaulted to as long as that date is in the future. And number of clients, again, you're seeing how many people are being reported on, and then you've got your number of leavers and your number of stayers, and then the types of households. So let's go into the tab B here. And here's where you're actually starting to see who was missing data. Remember, before we only saw that there was missing data in a column of data elements and answers of don't know and refused. Now we're seeing not only the client ID numbers, but this report has been updated actually. For those of you that are noticing what I noticed recently, we didn't used to have names available here. So the report has actually had an update in early October when our HMIS data standards changed. There was some slight adjustments here as well. So you'll see those reflected, and that's one of the changes that occurred, is we actually can see who the clients are now. I'm also going to mention that depending on how you worked with these reports in the past, this implies now that we have to treat these 631 reports very much as containing client level data. We can't send these to you without taking out the names. So if we ever have to run a 631 report for you, we'll have to send it as an encrypted email, or we'll have to delete out the names, and we would ask you all to follow your own internal protocols as well on how you handle communicating this type of information, knowing now that you actually have identifying client information in these results. So just please note that change, because in the past we've been able to assume that the 631s were non-identifiable, but that is not the case anymore. These have client level data. So beyond that, notice here that I can immediately see that this client is missing social security number. And what I always like to do when I was working on cleaning up APR data, I would just go through the system and answer all the questions that are missing for the same client at the same time. And in general, you can see that you can do that pretty well for a lot of different clients in the system here. You also have your don't know, DKR, don't know refuse going on here. Those are the clients that have a don't know value or a client refused value, so you can verify whether you have that information if you have the ability to change that, because if you have it, you don't necessarily want to report on a don't know refused if you don't have to. And as I scroll down here, there are some descriptors at the bottom, alerter names, to try to help you understand some of these results, but this one doesn't have quite as many as the next tabs will. And if I go under tab C here, age and gender detail, this is particularly messy data because I'm looking at test data. So note all the nulls. And for this particular client, for Master Ogiwa, OG Way. He has no date of birth type, question answered, no gender. All of this is missing. So that is a clear indication that we can probably clean up some of that, hopefully. And we can look at some of the client records directly to see where that information is missing. Just let me know if you have questions about where you would find something that you see here. Because I think some of this is pretty straightforward, but you let me know if you need me to come to show you where in the system you would locate some of these errors. And notice that there's some black nulls and there's some red nulls. So if I scroll down, this one actually has more distinct alerters that can really focus you on which things you have to actually pay attention to at the top in the results. A red null, that's actually telling you something's missing that would be required for that client. But a black null, so missing values are indicated by displaying null in black font. And I guess that's everything that it's saying here. So in my mind, black nulls are not as much of an issue as red nulls. That's the way that I tend to interpret these reports. It's trying to draw my attention to a red null, but a black null is a little bit less pronounced because perhaps this is not a necessary question for this client. So in particular, you'll notice like where there's a value for primary race and it says null for secondary race, that's not necessarily indicative of an error or something that's required that's missing. That's just informational that this has no answer. So just make that distinction as well, that doesn't always imply a problem. But red nulls do. Those imply something that is potentially fixable if you have the data. Unknown over here for child and adult, that would be something I would pay attention to as well. And this would be corrected by putting in a date of birth. That would resolve the unknown for adult child there. This is helpful at the end here, this unaccompanied youth. The no is, in most cases, what you want to see. A yes might imply that there's a problem unless you're allowed to serve youth on their own. And again, just noticing the alerters that might be of assistance here in helping you interpret these results. You do actually get the date of birth here as well, just so you see another way to get data from the system that you might have other uses for. And you also get the APR age. And when it says APR age, that's calculating based on the time they were entered in the program, how old were they? So if it appears as if they should be older now because they've a date of birth, they've passed that and they are now a year older, keep in mind how old they were when they were in the program based on this date of birth and the entry date. So tab D here, assessment details. So this is one that I did actually find helpful here to note that you have a don't know that's in yellow background, red font. That's a problem. This doesn't mean that this isn't a value of client doesn't know that has HUD behind it. Notice that difference from what you would typically select in the database. This is just don't know. And that's telling us that this is a non-HUD value. So if I scroll down, notice the missing values, and I'm just looking for, here we go, so non-HUD values, non-HUD prior residence. Values are highlighted in red font on a yellow background. So if I went into test client 19555, I would find that they have an answer to the question of prior living situation. But if I went into the pick list, I would see another value that has HUD behind it that says client doesn't know. And if I changed it from don't know to client doesn't know, that would resolve this issue. I'm also seeing the red nulls, which are telling me that those are actually questions that are expected to be answered and are contributing to missing data, whereas I also have black nulls that are telling me that perhaps this is not a required question for this client. And as I come over also the non-required, that's something else that is explained by the fact that there's a no here. So if the answer to the question of whether you're a victim or survivor of domestic violence is no, it is not expected that you would answer the follow-up domestic violence question of when that experience last occurred. So that's why it's saying not required. And that's the majority of what we have here available under the alerters too. I tend to find as well that you only see the alerters described here that apply to your data. So this is based on what we have going on up here. Those are the alerters we're working with. And if we come to these these household details, these are really just breaking down who's in your households in a lot of different ways to look at it. The master household details, notice that there's these numbers for household IDs. Do note that you can't search the system necessarily by a household ID, or more so that data is not as useful for us. And the biggest thing when we're in client point, or client point I should say, but in general, master household, that ID number, that's just telling us that all of these clients were connected. Their entry is connected. So those are very different numbers. Client ID numbers are the ones that we can actually use to find the specific client in the system that you're referring to. And if we look at the other tabs here briefly, just note the different ways that these are represented for you, and the number of entries is also listed here for each of those members. And then a breakout in a different way to look at this too. So these are quite interesting. I don't always have a lot of insight on the household tabs in particular. If you have questions, let me know, but we don't tend to focus on these quite as much as the tabs that have entry-exit data, income data, and so on. So we'll move through these quickly here. And again, just another view of the client household membership here. But moving into the entry-exit detail, this is where you're seeing some more useful data for sure. Again, you have an entry-exit ID number. This is not your client's ID, so this number is very specific to the more so the back end of the system of an ID number that's associated with the entry-exit record. We don't see those in Client Point, but what we do use in Client Point is these client ID numbers, so those are very much important. This for us is not as important when we're analyzing these results. Entry date, this is helpful to see, and the no exits in blue, that's jumping out at us here, as well as exit dates, and interim dates are here as well to show you when you did your interim review. LOS, LOS refers to length of stay. So how long has this person been in the program if they have not yet exited? Or if they have exited, how long did they stay? So either way, you're seeing a calculation by days of how long a person stayed in the program. Keeping in mind, anyone that was in the program 365 days or longer is expected to have an interim review of an annual assessment type. So be looking out for those, and we'll see in the next tab how you can tell whether you've done your interim reviews or not. You have your household types, households with adults and children, or households without children, and then the destinations for those that exited. And this is that household ID number, so you can see that it's the same number for all these clients, which tells us that they're connected. This is a household, whereas then you have a distinct record here, and then someone without a household over here as well. And then your nulls for entry, exit, age, folks that are missing a date of birth is why that's happening. But income detail is going to definitely be one that has more information. So far right now, there's not a lot of alerters going on. We have the red null, the no exit for stayers. Records for stayers will display no exit in blue font on a neutral background. This is just informational. But under income detail, this is where we're going to see a lot more information. And we're going to see our clients listed multiple times here. And I'm going to increase the size of my screen a little bit, or try to. There we go. So you can look at this a little closer. So notice at the top of the screen this now that I have a 1/1 plus, and I have these two little buttons I can use to move forward. If I go to last index, this will actually take me to the very last page where I can see all the alerters for my income detail and what's going on with my, my records. So some of these will be areas of concern, some of them will not, but these are meant to be helpful. And I'm going to go back here. Notice I'm on the third page now, so that's also a way to see how many pages there are. I'm going to go back to the first page and just show you some of the ways that this is set up. Starting off here, you have that similar structure where your client's ID number is here, their names are listed here, and then an ID number associated with this entry-exit record, which we just said was not as helpful in terms of understanding the data, but notice how many records there are for the same client right now, and this is how it's actually supposed to be. You might not see quite this many records, but it depends on whether the client has had an interim review or an exit. You'll see more records. So let's explain what's happening here. You also have your, I'll just finish telling you the what everything at the top means and then explain a little bit more of why we see so many records. So L/S at the top here, this is telling you whether this person is a leaver or a stayer. So did they exit your program or not during the reporting period? U versus O, this is under or over. Are they under 365 days or over 365 days? Income ID, I can't really tell you that there's necessarily something you would want to use that number for. That's definitely more coming from the back end. But entry income YN, so entry income yes, no. This is the question that sits outside the sub-assessment that says, is there income from any source? And then you get into the sub-assessment. So this entry income header and then the subheaders under it, entry source, received income source, start date, end date, amount. These are all the questions that you answer in the sub-assessment. And so you should note that they're sort of separated out here. You also have then the question below the sub-assessment of the total monthly income, as well as the exit. Now we're moving into those that have exited or had an interim review, which is FU, that's follow-up, meaning their last interim review would show up here. And this is again that yes-no question that sits outside the sub-assessment, but it would be at your interim or your exit assessment point. And then you get into the exit or interim review sub-assessment records, the source, the yes-no question of whether they received the income source, the start date, the end date, and the amount. And then, of course, another total monthly income record here. So this starts to look, at first, this is confusing, and I certainly can acknowledge that, but there's also a logic to it that I think is really helpful to start to grasp here. So the logic, the reason for all these red nulls here for the same client, because we are looking at the exact same client for all of these records, and if I scroll down, you can even see it goes all the way to here approximately for the one client. So if we analyze this on its own here, notice that this is a stayer. This is someone that's been enrolled in the program for less than 365 days, and we did not answer this question. It's not that there are this many errors for as many times as we see null, but what it means is that we never answered the question that sits outside the sub-assessment to say yes or no whether this client receives income on a monthly basis. But we do have an entry in the sub-assessment for earned income. There is a no to whether they're receiving that income source, and there is a start date and an end date. There is no total monthly income entered. There's no amount entered, so that's what we're looking at here. All these no record options here beneath, if we stay on the entry side here, these are all here because we have records over on the right side under the exit follow-up. So these no records are just sort of placeholders because there's data on the other half of this report. So it is kind of separated down the middle. This line right here is where it shifts from entry data on the left side to exit and or interim follow-up data on the right side. So just try to grasp that logic and let me know what questions you have right here if there are any. So notice that we did not have any amounts listed on the entry side, but if I come over to the exit side, we do have an indication of earned income with an amount of $200 that was entered on 2/4/2016. And then the total monthly income question was answered at that point as well with $200. So that's the way to interpret this client's data right here. Let's keep scrolling down to look at another client's data. And we'll look for a few specific pieces or a few specific situations that you'll find that you want to be able to interpret. So right now I'm looking at another client and noting that there is data in this question of, and I'll zoom out a little bit here to look at this a little bit easier. We don't see the top of the report, but if I had downloaded this from over here under document, I could look at this in Excel. Which is definitely what I think a lot of users do to ensure that you're able to analyze this. You can highlight things and you can really work with the data in a different way. So note with this second client here, we are looking at an answer for that question outside the sub-assessment of yes. This time we're seeing all of these extra records with answers here because we do the HUD verification. We actually create a record for every single source of income that's possible when we do the HUD verification, and therefore we are going to see a record for our client in this report for every possible source of income. So that's why you end up seeing all of them, even if the client doesn't have that particular source of income. But I want to be able to see the top of this report too, so I'll scroll up so we can see the headers here. And we're looking at this Bowman test client. So note there is a yes, they have income. Which one of these sources do they have? I would go under the received income source column here to see which one it is. And as I keep scrolling down, and there we go, we got to the end. It looks like we actually don't have one of these sources indicated as a yes. Logically, I would assume that we would have, but again, this is test data, so you would be looking for that logic of if there's a yes, which one is it that they have? And then you could be, if I scroll back up to show you the headers here, you could be confirming the start dates, and if there's meant to be an end date, those would also be listed, but you can confirm your amount here with the total amount here as well, if you had amounts in both. And then notice the blue here on the right side for this client, that there is, if we kind of focus on this client at the bottom here, there is answers. So this blue is telling us that there was an interim review done, especially considering this is a stayer. We can assume that this is an interim and not an exit. And yeah, it looks like these are all no's as well. So this being test data, these aren't the greatest examples of how you would actually interpret your own information, but it is just giving you a sense of how you interpret these results in general. One thing I do want to pull over here is the left side of the screen. If I expand this arrow, and I'll collapse it again just to show you how that works. Right now it's collapsed, but notice there's this black arrow on the left side, and if I expand it again, There's something called input controls when you're working with an APR, and specifically the 631 report. They just populated. I didn't do anything to make those populate when I pulled this over. I just had to wait a second. But the input controls are available because I have this little icon at the very bottom left selected. There are other icons that if I clicked on one of those, I wouldn't see this, and this would be the only one you would use really, is the input controls. The other one, I suppose you might want to use the navigation map as well. This is one where you can click through on the left side, the different tabs instead of clicking on the bottom if you want to work with this in ART. But if I go back to input controls here, just notice what we can do because we have this report in ART. If I'm looking at a lot of data, I can filter. So if I am interested in looking at only my stayers data, so meaning L and S, only the S's, I could click on this stayers only little button here, and that is changing the results that I'm seeing so that I would only be looking at the clients that are stayers now. So that's one thing you can do. Note that you absolutely have to change this back to the all values option. You have to be careful with the input controls. Once you turn them on, you really have to remember to turn them off so that you're not looking at data in a filtered way if you're not intending to. So make sure that you turn them off when you're done analyzing that particular subsection of your data. But notice you can look at just the children's records. If you wanted to look at just kids that are represented in your program, this is a little bit easier to see how it changed. Now I see one page worth of data and there's only 3 clients listed. So if I change this to unknown, meaning clients that maybe are missing a date of birth, it's even smaller. Now I can see just the clients that it's unable to calculate whether they're an adult or a child for. And I'm going to put it back to all values. And you can do your length of stay, those that are staying less than a year or over a year or more. And then you get into the really fancy ones now. Summary and entry income. So you might be noticing a connection here to the 625 report that we looked at. Who has no income? Who were those clients in the 625 that contributed to the number representing clients with no income? So here you go. You have a list now, and notice it's just one page. I can't move forward anymore. So it's 2 clients in this particular test data that are reflected as having no income. And then you can look at the details of this. So something that just popped up here that's really important for you to see is this text on the right side representing interim or exit data over here. Well, you have text over here that's green and it has a strike through it. This isn't telling you that you have not entered an interim review of an annual assessment type for this client. So the way that this would be corrected is you would actually have to create data in the client's record in Client Point under the interim review for this particular entry and make sure that's an annual assessment type. And you would also, again, want to follow those rules of making sure that you enter that data within that 60-day time frame, 30 days before, 30 days after their anniversary date of entering the program. But this is actually going to contribute to missing data when you see this strike through the text. So these are ones that often we have to provide support for agencies on what's going on with missing data. This will often be a source of missing data because if there is no annual assessment, then you are reflecting missing information in your calculations. And let me know if that raises questions, but that's an important alerter. Again, remember I have to take off this this filter or my input control to put it back, and as it calculates, you see that change. I am also, and I'm going to sort of let you all kind of start to work with these if you haven't yet. You can start to see any income changes, clients that retained income, which was the same income from entry. no income at entry, no income at exit, who just didn't have income at either point, and so on and so forth with the ways that you can interpret this. It actually has the HUD verification at entry too, of different ways that you can filter. So do reach out to us with questions, but just also be careful with these input controls because they do not turn off automatically. So I'm going to push that back, noticing that we only have 8 minutes or so left here. So do make sure you tell me if there's something very specific that you wanted to absolutely make sure we covered, that I get to it. But I think it's probably helpful to show you one more thing on this tab. And also just note all of these, which we looked at these briefly, but we didn't really look at them at length. Valid income, this is an important one. Stayers over 365 days. Stayers who have 365 plus length of stay with a valid interim follow-up are displayed in green. So if there's green text without a strike through it, you are all good. That means that you have put in your interim review and it's green because they are a stayer who has been in the program for more than a year and you've already completed your interim review. But stayers for longer than a year without a valid interim review are displayed in green with a strike through. That's the one that's going to contribute to missing data. And then here's the other one, an indication of a stayer who does not yet require an interim review. They haven't been there for 365 days. They're the ones in bright blue showing you that they're still okay. And Unita, you had a question. Oh, you wanted me to repeat the interim requirements. So the way it works is you can do interim reviews at any time after your client enters your program. Interim reviews of an update type would be used anytime income changes or something has changed that you want to reflect in the assessment and capture in your APR. But you must, if you are a HUD COC funded project and keep your clients enrolled for longer than a year, you must do annual assessments using interim reviews, and you have to do them within 30 days before or after the anniversary of the day the client entered your program. So if a client enters my program today on 11/18/2016, that client is due for an annual assessment on 11/18/2017, but I have a window between October 18th, 2017 and December 18th, 2017 to enter my interim review of an annual assessment type in order to satisfy the requirements of HUD and to make the APR function properly. And you are welcome. I'll quickly look at a few others tabs here. Notice that they work very similarly. My input controls, if I expand them, are still available here to interpret this data in different ways. You get still several records per each client because of the sub-assessments. And notice again this logic, the question outside the sub-assessment, the data pertaining to the sub-assessment record, the exit interim review information. So question outside the sub-assessment, and then again your sub-assessment records following the same logic. If I go to the last page of this, I'll see my alerters here. Remember, you have your refresh all button up here if you wanted to run this again on a different program or a different time frame. You also have an insurance benefits detail tab now. So notice at the top of this one it says non-cash / insurance benefit detail. This one is only pulling in the sub-assessment for non-cash. But there is actually a new tab now, K2. This is K1. And if I go to K2, now I'm looking at the insurance benefit sub-assessment data. This was not this way in the past, so this is different. So do note that you can now see the health insurance information separately. And what you're noticing on my screen as well is these new health insurance options that were added to our system with the updates to the data standards. They're actually reflecting as missing data, or not so much missing data, but I guess non-HUD values right now. And that's because we're looking at a time frame that was really before these values were effective in our system. So really this is to say that most likely you won't have this problem because we have records in here because of testing the system, but for the time frames that you're running your APRs for, they would be at a time when we didn't have Indian health insurance programs or other as options under health insurance. So you most likely won't run into this issue because you wouldn't have created data under these values for clients in the past year. Those only became available at the beginning of October 2016. So, but that is something that's an issue right now if anyone is choosing those those values for clients enrolled before October of 2016. There's the disability detail tab as well. It's giving you this information with the sub-assessments again. So I won't spend much time there, but duplicate clients, that would be one that you would want to pay attention to if you have more than one client that's represented more than one time in your data. That would be something to clean up, so because that's increasing your numbers or inflating your numbers, I should say. And then again, a tab and additional information. This is where you can see how you ran the report. And noting that that is a message that we pretty much disregard as long as this is listed as either today's date, the day you run the report, or you can let it stay as the date we have it defaulted to as long as it's in the future. The other thing that I had put in the PowerPoint presentation that I wanted to show you on the internet, and I'm going to pull it over here real quick, just to show you that when I send out the PowerPoint slides, you'll be able to link to this page on the HUD Exchange, which actually is the eSNAP COC APR guidebook. And this is really for the point when you've taken your data out of HMIS and you're ready to start entering it into eSNAP. So there's a guidebook that's meant to support that. So that link will be available. I'm going to pull back up the PowerPoint here to show you the contact information for me. So if you are looking to get in touch with us and you want to reach out to me directly, here's my contact information. This is how you reach the help desk. You can always email us to create a help desk ticket, emailing hmis@allchicago.org, and then the help desk website itself as well. I really appreciate all of you joining me. I did record this webinar and I will post it on our help desk as a resource for you in the future. Most likely this is just a starting point in the beginning of this for us, because we will probably be working together to work through questions and issues that arise when you go to submit APRs. And on the alternatively, we may be talking about how you can use your APR data for purposes beyond reporting, because there, as you might have noticed, there's a lot of information in there that you could find other uses for. And you're very welcome. I'm glad to be able to do this for you, and I look forward to the next time we get to talk about APRs. Have a great rest of your day and a good weekend, and we'll be in touch.